clients come to us with Lego or without, with what is on their mind, what is the topic, what is the dilemma, a challenge, an opportunity. Generally, they come in with what is. And then over the course of the first part of the conversation, we contract, we try to understand, well, what if? How would you like for it to be? What would be meaningful about that? And then when what if is formed, then that space between it, that's the liminal space. That's where all, in my perspective, all coaching, great coaching happens.
Welcome to the coaching studio. I'm your host, Lyssa deHart, and today I have the total pleasure of welcoming somebody I consider a friend, Paul Sanbar. He is an MCC with the International Coaching Federation, and I'm inviting him to this conversation because I love him. Paul is a coach who doesn't just think outside the box. He builds new ones, takes them apart, and reimagines what's possible. Through his hands-on thinking approach and the power of Lego serious play, he helps individuals and teams move beyond words, using their hands and imaginations to unlock deeper insights and creative solutions. But Paul's journey isn't just about coaching. From his early days as a psychotherapist to performing poetry with Boy George spinning the tunes, his path has been anything but ordinary. And yes, he was even a yell leader in high school, because of course he was, and because sometimes the best way to inspire others is to lead them with enthusiasm. So I can't wait to dive into this conversation. And Paul, welcome to the studio. I'm so glad to have you here today.
I am so touched to be here. For any of the other cheerleaders out there, my pinkies are up as I'm.
And is that the cheerleader sign? Did we just learn something new? Now I can be a cheerleader too.
Well, that'll be the next podcast.
Okay, very good.
We're already playing. I love it.
Yeah, that's the way we roll here. So honestly, Paul, you, as do many people, have taken quite an interesting journey to get to the place that you find yourself right now. What are some of the highlights that sort of led you to where we're having this conversation today?
Yeah. Oh boy. As I jokingly but seriously say that the book I'm forever trying to finish is titled A Fortunate Series of Overcorrections. And I think I love the title so much, I will never finish it. But really, of course, for our coaches out there, that's about reframing, right? Looking at all the journey, all the highs and, of course, the lows, and looking at it as all learning experiences. And so I have been so fortunate to have lots of overcorrections in my time up to this point. From starting off, I wanted to be an architect, actually. And that was my passion from a very young age. After a good amount of therapy and reflection, I realized that I just really liked things very correct. As we know, children who grow up potentially with a bit of chaos externally try to control a lot internally, right? And so architecture was for me straight lines and everything added up. I found out very quickly as I went into architecture school as an undergrad that it wasn't quite for me. But it taught me so much from that first opportunity for an overcorrection. My dad was a suit, and I say that jokingly, but my dad worked in business. I said, you know what? I'm at a really good undergrad for business school. Business is the way to do it. It'll give me a good career. So I dove into that and rode some friends' coattails as they helped me finish finance and all of the other very, very difficult courses. And that was a wonderful journey, but it also, the shoes that I had to wear didn't fit quite well. And interestingly, that was a poetry piece that I did perform with Boy George. So I realized that it wasn't architecture. It wasn't quite business. And honestly, I didn't think that I can bring my full self to the office. And for those of us who've been in the business world for many years or have been on this planet for a few years, it was challenging back then for me to feel like I could bring my authentic self. And so I had to hide. And I didn't like that so much. And so I made another overcorrection. And I apologize if I'm overcorrecting too much with this first question, but
no, not at all.
Wonderful. I made the choice to become a psychotherapist. I was very altruistic, still am pretty altruistic, but I decided no business for me. I'm going to save the planet one person at a time, one couch and seat at a time, if you will. And then as I continued to evolve, I realized I love business. I loved the creativity of building things with architecture. I loved psychology, but it was a bit too far in the other direction. And so I realized after a few years, and that's where I got pretty close to getting my license. It was kind of silly to leave at the time that I did, but I said, you know what? There's this thing kind of between business and psychology called coaching, and I think that might actually feel a bit better. Those shoes maybe a bit more comfortable. And over the course of all of that, oh my gosh, I learned so many things. But the biggest thing that I learned is that I am an architect. The medium is different. It's not wood or concrete. It's people and their dreams and their leadership journeys or their relationships or whatever it might be. But I get to help people build their life. And so I am an architect, and it's kind of come full circle, and it brings me so much joy to be able to take a pun intended, a brick from each one of those overcorrections and as all change is just because we know when we want to go from A to B, we actually have to go to C to understand where B is. And so all change is overcorrection, if you will. And so I feel like I have whittled it down, and now my overcorrections are much finer, but more intentional and authentic to me. And the shoes I wear, comfortable and kind of shiny and glittery too.
You said something really interesting, which is we want to move from A to B, but before we can do that, we really need to understand C. Could you share more about that philosophy?
Yeah, I mean that's really the essence of the book, and looking at, I I as a young person, I always, I looked at, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. I shitted on myself so much. I had shit all over my pants. Listen, I apologize. Um, and so I kept thinking I need to not be here. I need to be over there. But I also didn't know where there was. And so we sometimes when we're young and we make bold choices. We decide we're gonna stop, working a pretty good job in business and become a psychotherapist, right? But if I hadn't made that choice, I would never have known that executive leadership and executive coaching is what I am here to do, right? So I firmly believe that in order to shift or change or grow or evolve in any sort of way, the best way to explain it is the adage around the marathoner or the runner or the sprinter, to be more accurate. They say, and I'm not a runner.
I'm not a runner either, but we'll play with it anyway because we've seen people run.
I've seen it before. They say run through the tape. The normal human condition is to say, I am at A, and I want to go. I have kind of figured out what B is, And so the normal human condition is to take steps toward, and of course we're using metaphor to explain this, take take steps towards B, but it's natural and human to start to slow down when we see B. But the sprinting coach and the leadership and life coach would remind us we gotta run through the tape. And so C is through the tape. And only when we get through the tape do we realize where B is. Because we don't know exactly where B is if we slow down and potentially even stop. It may be correct, but it may actually not. And so we can, when we get to C, we can reflect back on where actually is B. It's actually it takes into so much of the liminal spaces framework that I've developed as well, right? Thinking that all of these are coaching as a directional conversation.
Well, something that I love about it, which I'd never made a connection to until this moment, but I have dogs. And one of the things that we do with our dogs is an event called Fast Cat. And what the dogs do is they have to run as fast as they can for 100 yards. And it doesn't matter what kind of dog you have. You could have I have short-legged dogs, and you could have a greyhound. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, the dogs just all have fun. But one of the things that they say when you're calling your dog to you the 100 yards away is that you turn and you start running, because they'll stop at the tape. They'll stop wherever you are. And so I really love this. Like, we have to keep running past the tape. It is so important. Otherwise, we slow down as we're hitting the tape and we don't have the momentum maybe to keep going. Or, to your point, know where B even was.
Right. I mean, it's both sides. It's both and, right? Because and so much of the work that we do is about the reflective practice, right? So the reflection, not just reflection on action, but reflection in action. So thinking about it as we do it in our, with the work that we do, but also thinking about how it went, what we learned, where is it that we got to, how did it feel when we moved through it. And that's where we really learn what that new homeostasis or that new you is, only by kind of getting a little bit past it. So it also allows us to experiment, to try something new, to do something that even if we think it may not be the choice, to try it anywhere safely and realistically, of course, because how will we know what it really is if we can't look at it from both sides, right? We know, I mean, as time only moves forward, right? So we know how it looks from this perspective. But if you think about it in coaching, right, we sometimes ask our clients to visually step into the future and look back to where we are now.
Or even to look back at a time where you did something really successfully.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're doing the same thing. We're looking back to take the learning that we might apply it forward.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's as somebody who struggled with a lot of perfectionistic traits, getting started, taking that first step was often the most challenging one for me. And so it was always, well, I want to get to B, to continue using that. And B got so restricting and confined, and some coaches, stop using the term goal, right? Because it feels very singular instead of like a vector or the array of areas, because we know what B is from point A, but there's space between A and B, and we change between A and B, and the goal may change as well. And so only when we get to that place are we able to fully understand it. And often looking at it from 360 degrees, meaning past it, is the most helpful way to understand what it is.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. And I mean, if this is what your book is about, I, along with the audience, highly encourage you to not shit on yourself, but get her done. And I mean, and to this, to a certain extent, the metaphor plays through with even that, right? It's your own race to be run and to move past point B and see what you see on the other side of that.
Quick interruption. And I just want to say thank you so much for being on my channel, for liking and subscribing to the work that I'm doing. It means a great deal to me, and I'm very appreciative of it. I also want to extend an invitation to my monthly Q&As so that you have an opportunity. If you're a coach, it's my treat. Sign up below or follow the link, and you can come each month and have an opportunity to get a resource development CCE, as well as participate in a really rich conversation about how we show up as coaches and what we would like to have be playing with in our own work, basically. So you are invited, and thank you for being here.
One of the ways you and I met when you were still a PCC, and I took your Lego Serious Play training, and I enjoyed it so much. And I ended up writing about it in my book because of the fact that I think it's so powerful as a way to work with all sorts of people, not just people on the spectrum, although I do think that it is magical with people who don't necessarily get like visual or somatic metaphors, like those don't make any sense to them. There's something about that hands-on playing with the little blocks, and that the blocks become artifacts, and the artifacts are made up of blocks of meaning. And I would love to hear two things, but the first thing I'm really curious about is I remember us having a conversation that you were going to work on getting your MCC using Legos. And so I don't think I've ever had a chance to ask you about it. How did you do that? Or
it informed a lot of my journey, and for you and the other MCCs and aspiring MCCs out there, there's so much unlearning that needs to happen. In fact, I fully believe there's way more unlearning to become a masterful coach than there is learning. And so so much of working, of creating and working with the framework that I developed, I had to really step away from how things worked previously, right? And so I got really passionate about well, the way I explain it is about the space between the client and I. The way I love to explain coaching with Lego and without is this notion that there are three parts there are three entities, right? There's the coach, the client, and the space between us that the client owns fully and wholly. And what I got to learn as I further developed and practiced and played with the framework through the MCC journey is just how much I realized, these questions that I'm asking with Lego bricks, they're the same questions that I could be asking without them. I just have to trust that they are there energetically, emotionally, somatically, maybe not
tactily,
but they are there. And I think really trusting yourself and your client is one of the biggest parts of the unlearning process. And so it played a role. It was a couple bricks in the process,
but it wasn't the whole build, is what I'm hearing.
Well, because some feedback came that, if you want to pass, you may just want to do a nice a nice MCC recording.
And I think this is crucially important because it's an interesting conversation, and I have it with enough people at this point that I think it's fascinating because it keeps coming up in a myriad of ways. But there are many different ways to work with people that are really powerful, and so I don't take anything away from those different methodologies. And yet, to your point, that if we trust that we can be our curiosity can be informed by what we know, that we don't have to rely on any one technique. We are the tool, right? And are there other tools out there? Like, I love Lego Serious Play. I think it's great. I think it's great in a multitude of ways. And yet it's not going to be perfect for everyone. And it does get in the way of bringing in this sort of process into the coaching conversation that takes you out of the assessor's eyes as showing up fully with your thinker. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and all of them are great, right? It is. I have to remind myself because I live in this world of Lego. My news feed is about 70% Lego, which is good because that means it's a pretty colorful, happy feed these days. Um, but that is, that's my perspective, right? That's that's the world that I see, right? And so back to this three entity thing, right? The space between us, I can only see it from my perspective. Part of the MCC journey is accepting that there are many perspectives and many of them work. And for the purpose of getting the MCC, I definitely said, you know what, let me just let me do what
I have to judge myself a little bit here.
Yeah, I'll play later.
Well, and what are some of the examples that you've had of how powerful Lego Serious Play can be with the people you're working with?
Well, since you brought up neurodiverse clients, I'll start there. And many people come and want to learn this methodology because they've seen a video or they've noticed, wow, this could unlock so much of what I believe my client has within them. But then I don't, as I, sometimes struggle to help them see it. Let's keep using visual metaphors here. And so, some of the things that have really been really powerful is just this notion that bricks, as you shared, they have meaning, they have energy. And when I train people, I say, don't afraid to ask questions of the bricks, and don't be afraid to let the bricks talk back to you, because if you ask them, they may respond. And so I say all this because sometimes when I'm working with clients that I feel like I may have to adjust a little bit of how my coach presence might be for them, I realize that, sometimes the bricks are grounding tools or psychological anchors for them. Sometimes it's the relationships they have with the bricks. I jokingly say pretty much everybody on the planet has a positive mental image of Lego unless they just stepped on one.
Yes. I will 100% agree with that.
And so there's this safety that comes into play because our eyes are the thing that change the least from birth to death, right? And the analogy is that while it's the physical orb or orbs, but it's how we see. So when we look down at those bricks, we're taken back to 8, 9 years old when all things were possible, when we made up games and we made up the rules and we decided that we could be a superhero or anything we want. And I'm going off on a little tangent, but what happens with so many people is that when the bricks are there, that childhood playfulness comes about, the possibilities, the 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 mindset that we want so desperately for our clients to have. I mean, I have goals for my clients. And one of them is that they think big, right? I mean, I get it, right? It's their goal, but it's in those spaces where I might be able to ask a somatic question that is super woo, that to some people would just, I mean, they'd want to hit the red button on the Zoom screen, right? But by saying, what energy do you think that red brick has? Or if it were to, where does that brick reside in you? And there's something about this notion that it's tangible and that they can see it. I mean, I'm maybe being heretical, but it brings the woo factor down. If I can say that, you can
Yeah,
edit
of
that
course you can say that. No, we're not editing. We're not editing. The woo factor is out there.
Because it's the people are grounded. They're there. It's. I'm not asking them to make up. It's there, right? So whatever type of client it is, and I realize that, you asked a specific question, I gave you a broad answer, but it's that grounding, it's that safety that we want with all of our clients. It's that place where where the bricks are really light, but also so heavy. They're anchors. That's why I call them psychological anchors. That's what they are, right? And I feel like that's from that place, many amazing things can happen.
Yeah. And well, one of the things that's really that I've experienced at any rate with working with the Legos is, one, I think the neurodiversity issue is, I mean, and I mean, I want my doctor and my jet pilot to have a serious case of OCD and be a bit on the divergent towards that kind of really, like, I see things really in a checklist format, right? Like, I want that from people who are like flying my airplane and stuff like that. And yet that mindset often doesn't have the language to be able to communicate what is really happening inside of them. And I would put not to put him out here in the world too much, but I would put my husband out there in that category of somebody who is very precisely driven and very methodically precise about a lot of things. And it was so funny because when I went through your training, you asked us to do a recording. And so I had said, hey, Michael, can I practice on you? And his first thing was, you're not going to make me talk about my feelings, are you? And I'm like, I promise. And he's going to give me grief about this because I just gave him a voice and he hates it when I give him that voice. But anyway, I did. But I'm like, no, I'm not going to make you, not going to make you talk about your feelings. And so he came up with his challenge and he created his first build. And then he explained it to me. And he literally talked for 30 minutes explaining all the different elements of it. I don't know that, I mean, we've been married for going on 27 years and we have really great conversations. And yet talking about himself, I'm not sure that I'd ever seen him spend that much intensive time talking about himself, which was so enlightening to me. And then, and I asked questions and he kind of like, what do you need to do with this wall that's in front of you? And, and he comes back and I shit you not. He comes back, he's got wings on his head, he's on a chariot. We've gone past the basic Lego thing, and he's like got this chariot opening and he's got his runway for the first 90 days of his new position with his new company. And it became the backdrop of his computer. And I think what was fascinating to me was how it opened up. And so I say neurodiversity in one hand, but I also think introverts. Like, I'm an external processor. And there's a lot of us who are external processors, even if we're introverted, because I'm also an introvert. While nobody may believe that, it's true. And I get my energy from just being with one or two people. But I'm still a verbal processor. And I think one of the things that's brilliant about Legos is that it allows the internal processors to give voice to the experience that they're having. And I just don't think that you can dismiss that as the value that that offers a person who may have not ever been given that language to communicate it without something in their hands that they can explain.
Yeah. And it's that, some people, if you ask them a wonderful question that they want to answer, they need a couple minutes to, quite literally, you ask them a question, and picture this with me, folks, that there's a few bricks up here and a couple bricks over here and a lot of bricks swimming around in their gut and maybe a couple bricks in there, and they need a few minutes to figure out which is which, where it goes, how it formulates, and then they can share it. And so that is the process why it's so powerful for the external processors. They're great. It works with them in other ways, which I will come back to in a moment because I'm similar. But I feel like when I've seen people actually get to share exactly what it was and how it was and the process and procedure of how it went, they feel really good about it, and then they want to share more, right? Which is, of course, even better. And what's so powerful is, and I, as somebody who's been having one-on-one and one-to-many verbal conversations with people for a few decades, I love them. And words fade when, this is recorded, but the sound in my voice is the sound waves are already getting smaller by the moment. But objects, bricks persist. And so somebody may share for 30 minutes, and us coaches or whomever, we may forget the first thing they said, but when they imbue meaning with the brick of the first thing they said, it's still there, or the third thing or the ninth thing. And we can, what's the connection between the first brick and the last brick, right? And they explain it quite well because they've imbued meaning into the bricks. We're visual creatures, and we're meaning seeking animals, right? The rock that was or the seashell that was on the in the beach had no meaning until my nephew handed it to me, and suddenly now that seashell has so much meaning to me. When people build it and imbue meaning with it, we simply can say, well, is there anything that you'd like to change with it? And I'd like this to be there, or this to be, and that's really the process of the conversations that we have with and without bricks. It's just, for some people, it really is that psychological anchor and that ability to internally put those bricks together and then show the finished product before explaining it.
Yeah. And, I have an art background, and one of the things I consistently hear from people is I can't do art because I don't know how to draw. And I think the other thing that Legos really does is those little bricks, while dangerous in the dark on the floor, are not scary, really. So people come to a Lego build with not all of that, the shoulds and the can'ts and the self-judgment. It's like, to your point earlier, I don't know that I played with Legos when I was 9. I kind of was I don't know. I was a horse girl, so I didn't really care about that kind of stuff. But I knew what Legos were, and I totally get their appeal and all of that. As a kid, I can see how much I would have enjoyed them. They're way cooler now, though, I must say, than they were when I was like 8 or 9. But all that aside, I think they just lower the threat of making a build. Like there's like you can take them apart really easily and redo them if you don't like what you're creating or if it doesn't communicate exactly what it is. But also to your point, which I think is highly important, is it's maybe just a red brick that the little mini me is holding, but it has meaning, and that meaning is completely unique to me as an individual. Like what it means to you, what it means to somebody else, completely different. I think it's such a interesting way for coaches, one, to create psychologically safe spaces to dive below the waterline, and a safe way for people to explain stuff, because once we've made it tangible, then all of a sudden we may be able to talk about it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You can't, when you can see it, you can understand it. Right. And that's,
This is the running through B. So really the Lego build is C. Like you're building it so that you can come back and explain it.
yeah. So, the liminal spaces framework, which is how I refer to it.
Will you explain that a bit more before you go down this road? Because I don't know that everybody, because liminal spaces means a lot of things to a lot of different people.
It does. And so let me take one little step back before I even explain that. And that is just that Lego Serious Place, it created by the people at Lego, a wonderful gift that they internally developed and created because they were struggling as a company. And of course, this, just like the beginning of this conversation that I had with you, they looked out and they looked within, and they developed this amazing methodology. And it was so powerful that in 2010, it was people were like, I want to learn this process. And they said, well, we're a toy company. We're not an L&D company. And so they did a wonderful thing that maybe only a country like a company like in a country like Denmark could do is they gave it away. They put it on the Creative Commons license. And so so there is no, you are a certified facilitator of Lego Serious Play and hands-on thinking coach from my training. But Lego doesn't certify anybody, right? So in ICF terms, there is no ICF, there is no regulatory body. In fact, I think it's actually a gift because we all have to police one another. In fact, I just sent a little email to somebody, somebody I've trained, and I said, hey, remember when you're posting about this and this, you always use this language. You want to represent the brand, the methodology, and of course me and my training well. But so that's important to just know first and foremost. Then I went and played around with it. I mean, it's a toy, right? So that's what we're going to do. And so I developed, I loved Lego Serious Play is as I refer to, a one-to-many tool, at least foundationally it is, meaning it's an OD tool for organizations, for cultures, for groups, and mainly teams. And my passion is more intimate one-on-one conversations. I love the teamwork that I do and the organizational work that I do, but nothing beats these type of conversations.
Yeah, one-to-one.
And so I said, you know what? I want to figure out how to use this methodology, but also take my training as a therapist, as an expressive art theorist, and I almost went and became an art therapist, but of course, back to that overcorrection, I decided to shift gears, and I'm very happy with that choice. So I happen to back to the liminal spaces, and thanks for letting me take that little off brick, and I'm back. I happen to believe that every great coaching conversation with a topic, and then even more importantly, a well-formed session agreement, outcome, contract, whatever you think of it, a liminal space is born. What do I mean by that? Well, liminal space comes from, it's Latin. Limen is threshold. Liminality is a psychological term of a space of unknowing, of a place betwixt here and there, an uneasy place, an uncertain place, but a place that because we have desires of evolution, of growth, of development, the people that we talk to, our clients and our world, they know that they want to, not just need to or should, but they want to move through that space, that liminal space. And so clients come to us with Lego or without, with what is on their mind, what is the topic, what is the dilemma, a challenge, an opportunity. It generally they come in with what is, and then over the course of the first part of the conversation, we contract, we try to understand, well, what if, how would you like for it to be? What would be meaningful about that? And then how would you know? All the contract questions. So when that happens, when what if is formed, then that space between it, that's the liminal space. That's where all, in my perspective, all coaching, great coaching happens, between what is and what if. Because coaching is a directional conversation. We move through time. It may be a behavior, a mindset, an intentionality, something about I am here and I want to be there, right? A to B, right? And so it just so happens that when we use Lego for this process, we can literally see the liminal space, or we actually don't see anything there because we're going to have that conversation. Well, with or without Lego question, right? How might you build a bridge between where you are and where you want to go? Or better yet, what's in the way? Who do you need to become to break that apart and build it back so that you can maneuver through where you are to where you want to be? Well, that is where we play in this framework, in the liminal space. And so at the end of the conversation, my client, I happen to feel that people come to coaching incongruent in some sort of way, right? They have an idea of what they want, that what if, and they're at what is. And so they're like, I'm not as aligned. They may not use those words exactly, but the goal is that by the end of the session, they are a bit more aligned, or at least a plan to continue with this alignment or with this congruency. So ideally, by the end of the session, my client sees in front of them who they want to be, right? They came in, they saw it, and I simply say, well, how would you like for it to look? And then, how might you change? What do you need to adjust? And, back to this notion of fortunate series of overcorrections, and I use the term reframing, right? That is we reframe and help our clients reframe in almost every coaching conversation. Well, I love the fact that the actual psychological term for the psychology term for that is cognitively restructuring. That is so quite literally, somebody has their structure in their mind or in front of us, and we just say, well, how might you maybe take even the same pieces and build it back in a way that feels more you? So we're helping them cognitively restructure what it is and who they are so that they see who they can be. And when they can actually see it, it makes it really powerful.
Well, and I think that's key here also, is that there's a sense, like for a lot of people, they may be very imaginative, and so they can see it. Like my husband and I, again, I'm bringing him up a lot today. Sorry, it's because he's going to your training. But I think one of the things that's always been sort of hilarious between us is like I can walk into a space and I can see three-dimensionally, I can see it all. Like whatever, like this wall needs to come down. We're gonna move this is how furniture will lay out. He cannot see that. Like that does is not a thing he can do. And I think that that's where the magic of this is, to your point, is that not only do I create it, I can then tear it apart and restructure it, but it is in a way that is tangible. I can see it specifically. And I think there's something for many people that is really important about that process in order to restructure the neurons and how they fire, because you're actually restructuring the brain. It's the thing that, of course, I love about metaphors also, because those things are alive in the mind of the person who is sharing them. And I see Lego serious play artifacts as like literal metaphors. Like they're just
Oh, yeah.
literal metaphors, right?
Yeah.
You talk
From
about
conceptual metaphor to literal metaphor.
exactly. It's not
George Lakoff
conceptual.
would be very excited about what we're saying right now.
I hope he is, because I've only like tried to his work seminal for me.
It,
You
it, it,
you
blows, it changes how we see the world, right?
well,
I
and
mean,
it
yeah.
yeah, I don't know that it changes how we see the world, but I think for me, at least, I don't know, yes, maybe, but I think what it really does is it gives language to something that was unconscious and implicit, but that I don't think that we really fully understood the power of how the language was impacting the structures of our brain. And so I think it's so important, his work. So, but enough about Lakoff. And you use the language of purposeful play in coaching. Why do you believe that the playfulness is so essential to transformation?
Yeah. Well, so I I think all coaching is purposeful play. And I hold on to that. And of course I'm biased because play is at the core of who I am and who I love to be. I
I
used to
see
think
that 9-year-old boy in you. I see him right now.
I used to think that it was creativity, but I realized that it was while I love creating things, it was the joy that I had in that early process of of building building it, right? So, you know, there are, speaking of great, amazing theorists like Lakoff, another one is Dr. Stuart Brown, who is known as one of the preeminent researchers and scientists of play in children and in adults. And so there's from him, and there's lots of different types of play if you look online, but he has about seven that he refers to. The first one being attunement play, and of course, if you've taken any developmental psychology
Yeah, you
class,
see those little 2-year-olds next to each other, don't
yeah,
you?
yeah, and so, but taking that to our coaching, right? At the beginning, maybe in a chemistry call, or we are attuning. We may disclose a little bit more about who we are, about how we show up, because we're trying to create a trust bond between us and our clients, right? So we're attuning, we're playing in that role. But also, there's these other parts of play when we think about uh, sorry, when we think about, of course, body play, like body and movement play, which is paramount to children understanding their spatial recognition, and oh my goodness, it does so much for their brains. But we are asking our clients to physically move sometimes, but really at the core of play is this notion of imaginative and pretend play. So it's make-believe. And, they may, every coaching school may package it differently, right? The school I went to, we call them as if questions, right? Imagine as if there was a magic wand or you step through this. Only when we have done some attuning and our clients trust us, can we ask them a wildly silly, foolish question that only a 5-year-old and certified coaches ask people, right? We are asking them to play. We're asking them to pretend. And then we're asking them, we say, you know what? That story that you shared, do you like that story? Yeah, I like parts of it. Great. What parts would you like to change? Make up a new story. Narrative play. And this notion of brainstorming with our clients to think about creative play. These are all the types of play that children do that form the foundation of all coaching. Coaching is play. And then the last one is object play. And so, of course, I have a particular few objects that I like that we've been talking about for 7 minutes. So I think you get. So coaching is play, and serious, right? There is a serious component. We're not just playing for the sake of playing. There's a method to that imagine as if question, right? We don't just jump on the call and say, imagine as if there's a door that you step through and everything you wanted happened.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really a partnered experience. And I mean, one of the things, I mean, for one thing, I guess is the way I'll start this. For one thing, I mean, the research on brains under freeze, flight, fight, flight, or freeze, freak out, whatever you want to call it, fawning, like you just name all the Fs. There's so many Fs at this point. But I mean, we know that brain isn't going to come up with innovation or solutions or new ways of looking at things or even new ways of looking at ourselves. And I think one of the things that really is highlighted here for me is the reminder of how important this playful piece is, because it's the brain that will solve whatever needs to be solved, or at least explore it from new perspectives.
Right. We know as coaches, we don't change people, right? We don't, they come to us whole. We get curious about how they would like to expand that wholeness, but we don't change them in any way. We just give them opportunities to look at the same thing with a new set of eyes. And the way we do that is through play. We may package it with all, and I'm as a fan of all neuroscience, right? What you were talking about just a moment ago, my mind went, the work of Richard Boyatzis coming in and allowing people asking that first question to dampen all the Fs, to get them into that. We're just saying, hey, are you ready? What can we do to help you play? Because we know that when you're in that playful space, you're going to see things that you hadn't even thought of before, because you're going to be 9 years old again when you got tired of playing the game, you made up new rules so that you can keep playing because, mom or dad said, as soon as you're finished with the game, you got to come and clean your room.
That's right. There's more to this game. We have another rule. It'll take another hour before we can be ready. Going back to the beginning of your coaching career, is there anything that you would share with your younger self that might benefit new coaches as they're coming into this profession?
I'm hoping I'm answering the question in the way that is most beneficial. I had the fortunate luxury, and this is a fortunate series of overcorrection chapter here, right? I had the fortunate luxury of cutting my teeth as a neophyte therapist with some really challenging people that were in the deep into the DSM at the time, right? So essentially, what my clinical supervisor told me, good luck, but also just be with them. You may not change anything when you're with them, and as a clinician, as a therapist, you're given a few more things that you need to do than as a coach, right? But they said, just be with them and trust that you may not see the change. It may never happen, but at least they're with somebody that is with them fully, because they don't get that often. And so that it helped me become a masterful coach, because I let go of so much of my desires, my ego in the process, because, oh goodness, if I brought my ego into that room 25 years ago, it would have been shattered, right? In fact, I kind of did, which is why I left. Next podcast. So the gift of that is that be with your clients, right? We think of it, that whole and resourcefulness is that. And so I the gift I would give myself is allow that to happen a bit sooner, right?
Yeah.
That comes with time, of course. It comes with
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. And, I'm kind of reminded, Marsha Reynolds said on one of the podcasts that just love them, love them, and without the judgment and without the romantic piece of it, but just love people where they are. And I think, you mentioned, be with them because they may not have very many people who have done that for them. I might even just stretch that out to everybody. Because how many of us are blessed enough to have that being without some idea about what we're supposed to be doing differently, or some expectation of how we're supposed to react, respond, or what we're supposed to do, and push back on ideas. Like, I don't know about you, but there are only a few people that have no attachment to the outcome of whatever I'm magically thinking about, without having a kind of like, but how are we gonna make the car payment or whatever, like, well, how will I get paid? And so it's a really sacred space that I think you're talking about, which is this space of being with another human being without any attachment to their outcome, or the need to influence their way of exploring it. And maybe, and something you said earlier, I mean, I think this really sort of circles back. It's not that we want people to go, I want to jump out of an airplane. No, go do it. Just go find an airplane, just jump out of it. I mean, there's probably a class you need to take. You probably want to strap some guy or gal that has a parachute for both of you on, and maybe they'll make sure you actually pull the cord the first time you jump out of an airplane. There's ways of doing the experimentation safely, which is, I think, goes back also to the Lego Serious play as a way of looking at it, because you can build it. If it doesn't work, you can rebuild it. But that's a mindset shift also.
Yeah, and I'd love to briefly tap into that, because what happens often in the work, towards the end of a session, a liminal spaces session with a client, is they'll get that brick or a couple bricks that represented a block, both a block and a block. I get in at least 6 puns every conversation, so I got 2 more to go. Listen.
All right, stop, Paul.
They will sometimes take that block and just say, I don't want it. And they will quite literally throw it, right? Which is wonderful. And also an opportunity to say, well, how might you throw that, or how might you do that IRL, in real life, like, because it's so easy to, it's difficult and easy to manipulate and move the bricks. Almost always easier to move the bricks than it is to move our human condition. It opens up the opportunity to say, the way in which you threw that, how might you, who do you need to be to throw that equally when you leave here today? Or where does it land? Or how, when you pick, after I ask you that question and you go pick it up, how heavy does it feel now? Because it is, I mean, back to the metaphor, it is about imbuing, whether it is a block or it is an opportunity or a value or whatever it is, into those bricks. And then just being curious about what the bricks may say and what questions you might have for the bricks.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned a couple of people as we were talking. What is a book or person that you would highly recommend coaches or therapists to pay attention to? You mentioned somebody earlier. What was his name?
Richard Boyatzis?
No, it was. I mean, it was.
Dr. Stuart Brown.
Say that again.
Yeah, Dr. Stuart Brown. The book is called Play. It is. It's a foundational book to my work, but it is truly about play, and it more directed to the child or the child that exists inside of us. But it's a research book, but so fundamental to just how I try to show up in the world, not just with my clients, but when I'm showing up playful, I'm showing up as my authentic self, right? There is no mask. And this is me, and it's that work from Dr. Stuart Brown, probably somewhere right there.
Yeah. Anyone? Yeah. And is there anybody else or another book that you think people might need to take a gander at?
So you mentioned coaches and therapists. The book. Irving Yalom, a book, is an existential therapist. He wrote a book called The Gift of Therapy, and it changed how I got to. It gave me freedom as a therapist. A wonderful book that I still gift to my therapist colleagues. The most recent and the most fun book that I have gone through and done and taken through with my coaching cafe that I run here in Los Angeles for the ICF chapter is Robert Biswas Steiner's Positive Provocations.
Perfect. Yeah.
A wonderful book. It provokes coaching. It's little snippets of, why ask why, or ask questions of silence, or ask questions about interrupting and how do we do. It's a gift of a book, and I so enjoy it. And I had a little conversation with him about at Converge a couple of years ago that was great. And it's provocative, and I think play is provocative too.
Yeah. I have one last question for you. And this comes from a previous guest on the show, and you may have already answered it, but what was the thing that when it happened, you thought would ruin your life, but actually turned out to be the door to a new and better life?
Oh, so many things. So much failure. Of course, I laugh. This goes into a bit of a tangent, but in about 16 years ago, 15 years ago, my mom, who I love dearly, who has since passed away, I tried to be as helpful with her as possible, but she was a bit challenging at times, and she got physically sick equally as bad to her mental illness. And I was kind of moving through life, but not as alive as I could have been. And I made the commitment to take care of her, to be her primary caregiver in her last few years of life. It was not easy, but it forced me to dig deep within myself and learn about who I wanted to be and who I wanted to become. And so it was a gift that I chose into, and it really did change just how I want to show up in the world. And not that I would ever want anybody to have to go through an experience like that. But if you give it an opportunity to be with somebody that needs somebody to just be there, I encourage you to lean into that discomfort, because the gift of it is immeasurable, and we are all heading in that direction, my friends.
Yeah. Well, and on that note, Paul, thank you so very much for being in the studio today and sharing your perspectives, your puns, your wisdom, and just your energy around this topic. Thank you so very much.
A pleasure and honor to be able to play with you in this space.